All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a pretty hot topic these days, web scraping. And specifically, what's in store for us in 2025. I mean, the amount of data online is it's mind-boggling. And seeing as how web scraping projects have shot up, like, what, 300% since 2020, it kind of tells you how crucial it's become to really get a handle on how to extract that data.
Yeah, it really is a huge increase. And it just shows you how important it is to be able to, get at that data, use that data, if you have the right tools and techniques.
Exactly. So today we're gonna give you the rundown, the inside scoop on how to navigate this whole web scraping world. We're focusing on two of the big names, BeautifulSoup and Selenium. Whether you're just trying to get some basic info or you're trying to do some more complex automation, interacting with websites and all that, knowing when to use each tool and how to use them together, that's going to be super valuable.
I like to think of it this way. You wouldn't use like a screwdriver to hammer a nail.
Right.
Each tool has its specific job, its best use. BeautifulSoup. That's like your precision tool for carefully dissecting, the underlying code of simple web pages.
Yeah, it's perfect for grabbing exactly what you need from structured content that's just sitting there in the code, static content. And then on the flip side, you've got Selenium.
Yeah.
That's like having like your own little virtual user that can interact with those more complex, more dynamic websites.
Exactly. Selenium can basically like control a web browser, run it from code, which is essential for websites that load content with JavaScript. And what's really interesting is we're seeing this trend. I mean, in 2024, almost half, like 45% of web scraping projects were using this hybrid approach, combining both tools.
That hybrid figure, yeah, that's pretty telling. Shows you that the best strategies are all about using both tools together.
Right.
And just to, lay the groundwork here, BeautifulSoup, it's generally much faster, uses way fewer resources.
And that can make a big difference, especially if you're doing a lot of scraping or if you're working in an environment with limited resources. Like every millisecond, every little bit of memory you can save, it adds up.
So let's dig in a bit. Let's compare these two side by side. We've got a table here that really lays it all out, starting with the primary function. BeautifulSoup, it's built for parsing static HTML and XML. Think of it like, basic blogs, informational pages.
Yeah.
Stuff where the content is right there, in plain sight, in the code.
Right. It takes that raw code and lets you pick and choose what you want. Selenium, on the other hand, it's all about, like I said, controlling a browser, like a user.
And when it comes to performance, the difference is, well, it's pretty striking. BeautifulSoup, it's fast, it's light.
And Selenium, because it's running a whole browser, is going to be a bit slower, a bit more demanding on your system.
And setup, that's another big difference. BeautifulSoup, it's easy to get going, just a quick pip install and you're usually good to go.
Selenium, there's a bit more setup involved. You got to set up these things called browser drivers.
Yeah.
They basically act as a go-between. Selenium uses them to, to talk to the browser, to tell it what to do.
And JavaScript, that's a biggie. BeautifulSoup.
It can't run JavaScript. So if the content you want only shows up after some JavaScript runs, like after the page loads, BeautifulSoup won't be able to see it. Like think of those social media feeds that keep updating as you scroll. You need JavaScript for that. Selenium can handle that.
Right. That's a crucial difference. All right, memory usage. This is where BeautifulSoup's efficiency really shines. About 100 megabytes of memory.
Selenium, oh yeah, 5 times that, easy. 500 megabytes. And it can go even higher, depending on the page.
Yeah, that adds up when you're working on big projects. All right, moving on. The learning curve. BeautifulSoup, it's generally considered pretty easy to pick up. Good for beginners.
Selenium, with all its features for controlling browsers and handling different interactions, it's going to be a bit steeper.
And finally, concurrent operations. Because BeautifulSoup is so lightweight, you can run lots of instances at the same time without bogging down your system.
Selenium, because of, having to run all those browsers, it's more limited in how many things you can run at once.
Okay, that gives us a good overview. Let's zoom in on each one, starting with BeautifulSoup, the king of static content.
Yeah.
When should you definitely be using this?
Well, the main thing to look for is whether the content you want is already there in the HTML code without needing any JavaScript to load it, like basic e-commerce sites where the product details are right there in the HTML.
And we got to talk about speed. I mean, those key takeaways mentioned a 70% performance boost in some cases. That's huge, especially when you're going through a lot of pages.
Exactly. If you're dealing with lots of pages and the sites are fairly straightforward, BeautifulSoup is going to be your best friend.
You also mentioned resource-constrained environments. What did you mean by that?
So in things like serverless architectures or cloud functions, you often pay based on how much computing power you use, how long you use it. Beautiful Soup, being so lightweight, can save you a ton of money in those situations. Companies are seeing like 40% to 60% reductions in their cloud costs by using Beautiful Soup.
Wow, that's a strong argument right there. And it makes sense that it's also faster to get up and running. If you need a scraper working quickly for a simple site, Beautiful Soup's the way to go. And being able to run multiple scraping jobs at once, that's got to be a huge plus too.
Oh yeah. It's built for parallel processing. You can scrape tons of pages at the same time, no problem. And its low resource usage also makes it great for microservices and containers, where efficiency is super important.
Let's see some Beautiful Soup in action. How does it actually work?
Okay, so the installation, like I said, super simple. Pip install Beautiful Soup for requests. And then in your code, you import the libraries. From BS4, import Beautiful Soup and import requests. You use requests to grab the HTML from a web page, and then you give that HTML to the Beautiful Soup constructor, telling it which parser to use, like html.parser, like this .python.import requests from BS4, import Beautiful Soup, response request.get, https.example.com, response request.get, https.soup, Beautiful Soup response.text, html.parser. So that creates what we call a soup object. Think of it like a map of the HTML that lets you easily find and extract the data you need.
Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. All right, let's move on to Selenium now. When do you absolutely need to bring out this more powerful tool?
You need Selenium when Beautiful Soup just can't cut it. When you're dealing with dynamic content, stuff that's loaded by JavaScript, if you need to interact with a page like a user would, Selenium's your tool. Think of sites where you have to log in to see the data you want. Selenium can handle that whole login process, manage cookies, keep you logged in.
So if the data you want only appears after the page loads or after you click something, that's a good sign you might need Selenium.
Yeah, exactly. Selenium can see all that stuff. It can also handle things like clicking buttons, filling out forms, going through menus, basically anything a user can do. And it's great for scraping content that loads in pieces as you scroll or interact with the page.
And what about websites that are more, complex with lots of different pages and actions and stuff?
Selenium can handle that too. You can program it to navigate through pages, click specific links, interact with elements that change based on what you do, and it can even take screenshots, which is handy for debugging or just documenting what's happening.
Wow, okay, so it's a lot more versatile. What about setting it up? How does that work?
Like I said, it's a bit more involved. You'll still use pip install Selenium, but then you need to deal with these browser drivers. These are separate programs that Selenium uses to control the specific browser you want to use, like Chrome or Firefox. There's a tool called WebDriver Manager that helps with that, makes it easier to get the drivers you need. Here's a basic example of how you'd set up Selenium with Chrome using WebDriverManager.python.python from Selenium import WebDriver. From Selenium.WebDriver.Chrome.Service, import service. From WebDriverManager.Chrome import, Chrome Driver Manager. From Selenium.WebDriver.common.by, import by. From Selenium.WebDriver.support.ui, import WebDriver wait. From Selenium.WebDriver.support, import expected conditions as ecdriver.chromeserve.ChromeDriverManager.com.
Then you'd use Selenium's commands to find and interact with elements on the page.
So you create a driver, tell it to go to a website, and then you can use Selenium's commands to interact with the page.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's talk performance again. We saw those 2024 benchmark results, and the difference was, well, it was pretty stark.
Yeah, it really highlights the trade-off. So Beautiful Soup, it parsed pages in on average 0.3 seconds, used about 100 millibytes of memory. CPU usage was low, like 15–20%. And it could handle like up to 50 requests at the same time. Started up really fast, less than a second.
So it's super efficient, at least for static content.
Absolutely. Now, Selenium. It took 1.2 seconds on average to process a page. That's 4 times slower. And it used way more memory, around 500 millibytes. CPU usage was higher too, like 40–60%. And because it's running full browser instances, it couldn't handle as many requests at once. And starting it up took longer, like 2 to 5 seconds.
So you get more power, more flexibility, but you pay for it in performance.
Ah.
Okay, so that brings us to this hybrid approach, combining both. It sounds like that's becoming the go-to method.
It is, yeah. You use Selenium to do the heavy lifting, render the page with all the JavaScript and everything. Then you grab the final HTML and give that to Beautiful Soup to extract the data.
So Selenium handles the rendering, the interaction, and then Beautiful Soup swoops in and grabs the data efficiently. Makes sense.
Here's an example of what that code might look like. Python from Selenium import WebDriver. From BS4 import Beautiful Soup. From Selenium.WebDriver.Chrome.Service import service. From WebDriverManager.Chrome import Chrome Driver Manager. From selenium.webdriver.support.ui, import WebDriver wait. From selenium.webdriver.support, import expected conditions as EC.
Hashtag Selenium handles the rendering.
Right.
WebDriver.chrome, service Chrome driver manager .install.gen ec install. Hashtag wait for the content we need. WebDriver wait. Driver 10.until by Sia's presence of element located. Hashtag BeautifulSoup grabs the data. Soup, BeautifulSoup, driver.page source, html.parser.data, ec soup.final.shta booger.ec tactus class she.
So Selenium does the hard work. Then BeautifulSoup comes in for the easy, fast extraction. I like it. And we heard from some experts earlier, they seem to be big fans of this hybrid approach.
Yeah, Sarah Chen, a big name in web scraping, said that these hybrid implementations are becoming the standard for building robust, reliable scrapers.
That's a pretty strong endorsement. What else are the experts saying?
Michael Roberts, a web automation specialist, he says it's crucial to choose the right tool for the job. Companies that understand when to use BeautifulSoup and when to use Selenium, they're seeing big improvements in both performance and reliability.
So it's not just about having the tools, it's about knowing how to use them. Okay, what about mistakes? What are some common pitfalls people run into when working with these tools?
One big one is using Selenium when you don't need to. Like if the site is static, just use BeautifulSoup. It's way more efficient. And on the flip side, trying to use BeautifulSoup for content that's loaded by JavaScript, that's not going to work. BeautifulSoup won't be able to see that content.
Makes sense. What about resource management, especially in the cloud?
Yeah, so if you forget about memory constraints, especially in the cloud, that can cost you. Remember how Selenium uses way more memory? Running a bunch of Selenium instances can eat up your resources and drive up your bills?
Yeah, good point.
In testing is super important. Make sure your scraper can handle changes in the website. Websites are always updating. You got to make sure your scraper can adapt. And monitoring. Keep an eye on how much resources your scrapers are using. And error handling, make sure your code can deal with unexpected problems.
So basically, keep an eye on things, make sure everything's running smoothly.
Exactly. And another thing, rate limiting. Websites often have ways to detect and block scrapers. So you need to be careful. Use techniques like IP rotation to avoid getting blocked.
Good tips. All right, looking ahead, what's the future looking like for BeautifulSoup and Selenium? Are there any big changes coming?
Both tools are being actively developed. BeautifulSoup is focusing on making its parsing even faster and better at handling different character encodings. Selenium is working on improving its JavaScript handling and trying to make it use fewer resources. And we're starting to see new tools that combine the best of both worlds or offer hybrid features out of the box.
Sounds like a dynamic landscape. And the community, what are they saying about all this? What are the big discussions happening?
There's a lot of talk about using the right tool for the job. People are saying don't use Selenium if you don't need to. It's overkill. But there's also a lot of excitement about the hybrid approach, using both tools together to tackle complex websites.
So being smart, being efficient.
Exactly. And there's debate about which scrapers are easier to maintain. Some say BeautifulSoup scrapers are more likely to break when websites change. Others say Selenium scrapers can be just as fragile. And there's a lot of talk about the cost of using Selenium, especially when you're doing large-scale scraping. Some people are even saying if you're always using Selenium, maybe you should look for other ways to get the data, like using an API if the website has one, or using lighter weight tools like requests HTML.
Right, sometimes there might be a better way. So as we wrap up, what's the key takeaway? BeautifulSoup or Selenium in 2025?
The takeaway is there's no one right answer. It depends on what you're trying to do. Static content? BeautifulSoup is probably best. Dynamic content? JavaScript. Selenium is usually the way to go. And for many modern websites, the hybrid approach is the most powerful and reliable option.
So you got to know your website, know what you need, and choose the right tool.
Absolutely. Think about how fast you need to scrape, how much computing power you have, how complex the website is.
And start simple. Start with BeautifulSoup and only use Selenium if you absolutely have to.
Great advice. And these tools are always changing, so stay up to date, learn about the latest features.
Great advice. Websites are getting more and more complex, and anti-scraping techniques are getting more sophisticated. It makes you wonder, what will the future hold for web scraping? How will these tools evolve to keep up? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.